Bible says the message of the cross is
Foolishness.
foolishness.
Foolishness. Foolishness.
Foolishness to those that are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. What's up, you guys? This is Brian Sumner. Welcome back to the Foolishness Podcast. Hope all is well. You are doing great in the faith despite the ups and downs of life. I'm excited today to jump into this episode. It's been a long time coming. I know we're all busy, but I've got a good friend on here who is a husband, a father, businessman, longtime biker, a lot of other crazy stuff I'm sure we're going to hear, but a lead pastor and author and a good friend. Pete Cropsey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, brother. It's
Good
really
to see you.
Finally we get to do this.
To hang out, I know. And we pretty much started the podcast like 30 minutes ago because we began talking about everything.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
What's going on with you? You're cruising over, hanging out? And
you know, first of all, man, I want to just visit for a minute the way that you and I met and and how the fellowship was instantaneous. You know, it makes me have goosebumps because we were at a particular church to be unnamed, and and we ran into each other there, and you were in leadership there, and I was just kind of hanging out, and I was actually kind of hiding. I had,
even though you're like 6'4", are you, or what? Where were you hiding?
6'3",
under like a Tundra truck.
I was taking a sabbatical from ministry. I'd been a senior pastor, and I was in that place where I was doing a lot of ministry on my own strength, and not really. I was pigeonholing my wife into a situation where I don't have time for you. And, it was just getting bad. And the Lord spoke to me and said, dude, you need to go sit somewhere with your wife and just be in church. And so I did. I took her to this particular church where you and I met. And I went back to the basics, man. I was changing air conditioning filters and patching holes in walls and sweeping and scrubbing toilets and singing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I had my headphones on and I'd be listening to Bethel or, just rocking out, man. I mean, we're walking around the building and everybody's like, wow, you sing terribly, but it's good that you're singing, And
you're right there with me.
Yeah, right. And that was where you and I met. And, and so because our theology and our doctrine is so lined up together, we always had just the greatest conversations. And I remember meeting with you before church on Sunday mornings and just having these conversations. And I would leave so light.
Amen.
And it's great, man. So we see each other here and there over the years, the Beach Fest and different things. And Ryan stuff that we see each other at, and Ryan Reese. And now it's just really great to have this opportunity to hang out with you and just kind of yuck it up and chat about the Lord. And
Amen. Yeah, and I appreciate it. I was in the other room today. We're kind of demolishing part of the house, and there was a great theology book you gave me. And I know even then...
Foundations of the Christian Faith by James
right.
Montgomery Boyce,
That's
right? I remember giving that to you.
I got to finish the last chapter, I think. But even then, I'm seeing you this... I mean, you just told me today you're 64.
Boy. Why'd you have to say that?
But listen, that's crazy. I mean, you're 6'4", head-to-toe tattoos, lived a bunch of crazy lives. We don't know if this is going to be one episode or two, but I just remembered then, even early enough on my faith, having these conversations where here's this guy, and I get it, you were hiding, you'd come out of a season, you're like, Lord, I just want to be in a place worshiping, lifting you up. We had those conversations, and so that must have been 10 years ago, maybe,
10, 11,
or something.
12
and
years
so,
ago, yeah.
And for all those people who are younger, who are like, we don't get to hang out with people as much, you do have these encounters like Pastor Pete and myself where we just know what we're doing, where we are. You're a lead pastor. I mean, you've got your wife, your kids, your life. Instagram in some ways keeps us all accountable to what we're all doing.
Yeah.
I can check in with people, but then when you get to hang out with them again, I mean, this is the fellowship of the saints. I mean, it is a light feeling. We're talking about Jesus. We're making fun of stuff. We're joking around. It's like we're breaking bread. So, amen.
The beauty of for me, bro, is that, that was a season where I the Lord wanted to show me that I was putting the church before my relationship with Him. I was putting the church before my relationship with my wife and my children. And I thought that I was doing well.
Yeah.
The church was growing. People were getting saved. A lot of people were coming forward in the altar call every Sunday. Like, I'm doing this right.
Yeah.
But I felt my relationship with Dawn slipping away. And I put her in the back seat, I remember when I was in Calvary Chapel School of Ministry, and Pastor Chuck came, and he taught every Tuesday morning, and I would sit right in the front, like in the raincoat seats, you know what I mean? Like right in front.
Where you'd feel the spit, the baptism
right,
seats.
yeah. And I remember him saying, he goes, don't... Just because you've been called to the ministry, don't expect your wife to be called to the ministry. Don't expect her to be a Kay. Don't expect her to be a Kathy Laurie. Don't expect her. Just let her be who she is in the Lord.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was doing that, but what I didn't realize is that my wife has an incredible calling. And after that season where we were, where you and I met, I began to see my wife's ministerial gifts, more powerfully. And now, at First Love Church in Costa Mesa, we currently, she's a pastor there. And she just is, man. And there's no question in anybody's mind. And she gets up there with me on Sunday morning, and she has her 5-10 minutes where she's edifying the body and sharing. And I look at her in awe,
Well, I know at our church, when you hear our lead pastor, and I tell his wife, when she's timid, then she can be wild like all of our wives. But when a wife comes up and shares, she is in sync with her husband, and she does know the ups and downs, and you can catch just as much vision for where they sit in the church. And as a guy like myself that's going all the time, I need to be home at a church, hearing the pastor speak vision for the next few months, hearing the wife, seeing the elders and all that. So, and for those who don't know my wife, yes, she's been on some of the episodes, but she is timid, doesn't want to be at the forefront, and kind of like your wife. But
she's a tough one, though.
She's tough. I mean, she's the toughest person to me because she knows when to tell me why you're doing this, why you're thinking that.
They're a lot alike.
But then your wife has that ministry in the way she has her job, where for my wife, she does her raw bacon now, and she gets to engage people. And there's things I might have told her 6 years ago that she didn't even respond to, that I'll hear from the other room telling someone on the phone. I'm like, you've been waiting on that for 6 years to affirm what I said.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've been under the mentoring of a guy named Dr. Charles Browning. He's the guy that Pastor Chuck always used to send the broken pastors to. You know what I mean? And I've been broken a couple different times, and I, in fact, I was appointed to go see him many years ago, and I didn't. And during that episode of my life where, we were at that church where you and I met, I started seeing him. And he's been, Dr. Charles Browning, he's the most incredible man. He's like a father to me. I never had a father.
Wow.
I had a father, but he didn't know that, or didn't show that anyway. And we'll get into that as we go. But, Dr. Browning, he said to me, he said, the two will leave their father and their mother and become one flesh. And let me tell you something, Pastor Pete.
Yeah.
If you're not fully taking advantage of your wife's contribution to the relationship in your ministry in the Lord, then you're only operating at about half your capacity. And then he paused and he said, no, in your case, probably a lot less. And I took it to heart, man, and so now, our church is just flourishing. Wow. We're busting at the seams, and, it's a new season, and our worship team has we have got... Like, I remember when we first started in my garage with like 5 or 6 people, and I would make these little CD compilations for worship on Sunday with Jeremy Camp and Chris Tomlin, and and I do 4 songs, and I be up there with the remote on the
just
boom
clicking
box,
along,
on the boom box, and then I'd preach my message, and then hit the boom box for a closing song, and
I know what a boombox is. I don't think Isaac knows what a boombox is. He knows what an iPod is. Yeah.
So now we have this band. And it's so funny because it's one band. Yeah. But it covers all our services. So there's different personnel in the lineup, and what's beautiful about it is I'm just seeing this harmony in this. There's no posturing up like, well, I'm the worship leader, or I'm in charge. Everybody's just submitted to one another. Yeah. And that for me is a sign of solid leadership.
It's a healthy
that
church.
The Holy Spirit is leading. We don't have striving, and we don't have, everybody's
jockeying
just there to serve
position.
with a heart for the Lord, and it spreads. It goes throughout our entire church. It's like, we know that he who has been forgiven much loves much, and so I think, and I share from the pulpit. I go, I think one of the reasons that there's so much love in this church is because he who's been forgiven much love much, and we've been forgiven a lot around here, and particularly me. When I think about the times I've re-crucified Christ, consistently over and over.
If those
and
verses in
over
Hebrews
and
were applied to you and not to the nation of Israel,
I'd be in a lot of trouble. Yeah, I'd be in a lot of trouble.
And for those listening, guys, Pastor Pete has a church, First Love. It's in Costa Mesa, and it literally, Pete has been a staple in many of the surf, skate, all these different industries, knows everyone, whether it's living in Hawaii, here. And I say that because you guys chose to meet at the Hurley headquarters. So the world famous Hurley, they gave you this space. Hey,
it's so funny how that happened, because we were, after we grew out of my garage, and we had,
it's relevant to tell people.
Yeah, we had to find a venue, and we ended up in this little community center inside a residential neighborhood. And because I come out of the biker lifestyle, it's so weird. I was always confused. Am I a biker? Am I a cowboy? Am I a surfer? Because I've done all of those things. And,
are you Greek Jew? Are you?
Yeah. but it's funny because, we were meeting at this community center, and a lot of the setup crew were biker guys.
Yeah.
And they'd show up at 7 a.m, roaring through the neighborhood, and I would kind of idle in, but you can't really do that.
Yeah.
With straight pipes on a Harley.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't, it was about 9 months there before the community kind of got in an uproar and said, and they were very gracious. They gave us 60 days to find another venue.
Wow.
So I'm having lunch with Ryan Hurley.
Yeah.
And I told him, we lost our place. And he's like, what are you going to do? And totally jokingly, I said to him, I think we're coming to Hurley.
Yeah.
And Bob was there, and Paul Gomez, who is a strong brother in the Lord, and is still, in my my daily life. Yeah, you do. And so Paul was the CEO at Hurley at the time. So Paul and Ryan and Bob and I are having lunch, and I told him the story, and Ryan's like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I guess we're coming to Hurley. And I was joking. And Bob goes, that works for me. And Paul goes, come by Monday morning and we'll get you set up.
And this is before they were sold to Nike. So
yeah, it was just Hurley then. Yeah. And,
well, there's an English saying, many a true word spoken in jest. So though you were joking, God had some favor.
God had some favor, man. So we, I rolled in there Monday morning, and they gave us their whole town hall, made provisions for us to have our children's ministry. We've been there 12 years.
Wow.
And,
I know I've been over there a couple of times. I'm like, so you literally have a skate park that used to be there, and they'd record. And the reason I'm saying this, guys, is because I know Pastor Pete's going to unpack some of this even, but generally within Huntington, Orange County, there is this thriving band, motorcycle kind of raging lifestyle. It is in the East Coast where it's the accolades and the schools. Here it's like get into a band, surf, skate. It's kind of smoking a bit of weed. And
martial arts.
Martial arts, but then it's like the downside is drugs, weed, speed, meth, dead.
Yeah.
So how do you catch those people that are the generation between us even, you know what I mean, from 20 through to 60, you need, yes, it's the gospel, but you need to be able to relate to those people that you've met for decades now.
Well, this is probably a good time to go back into my story a little bit, because, I, like you said, I've lived in Hawaii, and I'm like, I go to Kauai, and it's like, Uncle Pete. But, my wife says, you're like the mayor of everywhere we go. And and that's the favor of the Lord. That's fog, favor of God, And I'm a big guy, and I'm tattooed from head to foot, and I make an impression where I go. And,
but you smile a lot.
Yeah. So, no, here's the thing. When I was a prospect in the Vagos Motorcycle Club 30 years ago, there was this salty old brother, man. And he's like, you're a big dude. And, kind of scary. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That was all. I loved hearing that.
Yeah.
And he says, so I got some information for you, man. He goes, if you're going to be really big, you need to be really nice.
Yeah.
So everywhere you go, here's my assignment for you. Everywhere you go, you put your hand out and you shake people's hands, and you be the peacekeeper, and you be the promoter, and you be the guy that puts down the bullies and raises up the downtrodden. It's an outlaw biker. I mean, a killer.
There's a methodology to this.
Yeah. This dude is a straight up killer, right? And he's telling me all of this stuff. He goes, you need to be the guy that always has a smile on your face, that hugs and loves on people, that protects people that can't protect themselves. And because what's going to happen is, if you go the other route and you have your chest out and you act all prideful, when you need to hide, nobody's going to hide you. You're that guy that everybody loves because you've loved them first. And this is so scriptural, coming from this old salty outlaw biker who'd never been in a church in his life, meth head, just a dirty old biker, man. And he's like, if you love people and you need help, their doors will always be open to you.
Even in a crazy kind of killing machine lifestyle. Yeah.
And I took that to heart, man. I was on the yard at Tracy, a prison that they call the Gladiator School. That's the nickname for Tracy Dual Vocational Institute in Stockton. And
209.
I'm on the yard, and there was this guy there named Bubba, and Bubba weighed, I don't know, 3.25.
So that's actually where Bubba was, huh? The Bubba you hear in all the movies. He actually was there.
No, this guy's name really was Bubba, and it's not a an alias. But this guy was like, he looked like a refrigerator with a watermelon on top. And covered with tattoos. I mean, this guy has face tattoos before face tattoos were even a thing.
Yeah,
and he was the meanest. Just not a charitable guy. I mean, he was a bully, and he was a predator, and he was a sexual predator, and
in the prison as well.
In prison.
Wow.
And he had been at Tracy for 12 years, and he was like 2 weeks from paroling. So I'm on the weight pile with this guy named Lee Vaught, who was old school Orange County gangbanger, and I was fortunate to be trained up in the ways of the prison lifestyle by some really solid, I mean, I look at it now and I'm like, gee, I wish my heroes would have been like Joe Namath or, but they weren't.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I picked the wrong heroes, but he was one of them. And so we're on the weight pile. And Lee says, wow, watch this. And Bubba's on the bench press. He got like 400 pounds, and he's just slamming it around like it's Tinker Toys.
Yeah.
And I see this guy slithering up, this little guy, beanie pulled way down, big baggy yard jacket, gloves, shades, and he's packing a piece. And he comes up and he pokes Bubba in the chest about 5 or 6 times. And all that weight, that bar with that 400 pounds came down on Bubba's head, popped it like a watermelon.
What?
Brains everywhere.
What?
And my friend Lee says, Grasshopper, what did you learn from that? Now we're face down in the dirt, and there's this big sign on the fence, no warning, shots fired. And he goes, what did you learn from that, Grasshopper? And I said, well, I don't know. And he's like, if you're going to be really big, you better be really nice. So I heard that twice.
So that's a thing that's
been a theme for me.
So this guy's about to get out of prison, and does he end up dying or
what?
what?
Oh yeah, his head was popped there was brains everywhere.
Why?
He
just was over the guy. This guy was a lifer.
This guy had been, this young, small guy was sick and tired of being booted around, and I don't know what was going on. What Bubba was actually doing to him, but
he could have been the same
it was
kind of
celebrated.
Thing.
I mean, I looked up at the guard tower, and while this is happening, the guard is turning around filling his thermos.
So he knew maybe either he's like, whatever.
That's my assumption. You know?
Wow.
But
so were you not a nice guy back then? Were you? Because we can unpack.
No, you know what? I've always been a nice guy.
So even when you were in this motorcycle thing, you would just find your place, and someone says, "Hey, you're this big, you better be nice." And what even led you?
That already
to that?
Spoke to my character. I was already nice, man.
Well, to me, you're a truth guy. I feel like I was always a truth guy, whether it was growing up with the Bruce Lee influence of, stripping back the levels till the truth's revealed. That's most of us.
Well, that's why you and I connected so much.
Yeah, go into that philosophy side, but then it became the theology and the depth. So
before I ever heard anything about God, man, I was reading like, Siddhartha by Hess, and one of my favorite Hess books is a book called Narcissus and Goldman, and it's a very poetic story. And Narcissus is this parochial school teacher in England, and Goldman is this very poetic young boy who comes under this tutelage of Narcissus, and I came away from that feeling like it was a story of the duality conflict inside of one person. The stoic, serious, disciplined, legalistic person wrestling with their desire for poetry and for love and for joy and for beauty and for
got what it was, right?
Right. So I always was like, maybe coming from a bicultural upbringing. When I was 7, my mom and I moved to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I was the only white kid in town. Was there for a few years. And then, being like the only haole on the North Shore of Kauai. Well, there was a few, but,
You and the Irons brothers.
Yeah. And I'm 50 years older than those guys. So, 40 years old.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know. It's funny. Oh, I might as well just go right back and jump off in this thing with like...
because people are just
when the doctor spanked my butt and I cried. We'll go from there. No, but I remember, I grew up in the 60s and I grew up in Laguna Beach, California, which was the epicenter of the LSD, Timothy Leary, Tune In, Turn On, Drop Out, Baba Ram Dass, Be Here Now, generation. I grew up on Eastern mysticism. Yeah. And, but when I was 4 or 5 years old, my dad was working in Hollywood and we were living in Laguna Beach, and he only came home on the weekends. And I remember one Friday night waiting for him to come home, and it was getting really late. And my mom's like, "You need to go to bed." And so I do, but I'm standing with my ear plastered up against the door because my bedroom door was adjacent to the living room, and waiting for him to come home. So I could just hear his voice, you know.
Yeah.
And he comes in, and like without any prelude, my mom says, "Charles, I know you're having an affair." Mm-hmm. "No, I'm not." "Yeah, you are having an affair, and I'm not going to be married to a man who doesn't love only me, so I want you out of here. I want a divorce." Just like that. And his comment was, "Okay, I'll be out by the weekend." She's like, "No, you'll be out by tomorrow." And I'm waiting for them to say something about me, you know, and nothing's forthcoming. And that was my first experience with invisibility, you know, and I felt abandoned, you know, felt abandoned. And so I didn't see my dad for a year, and he shows up on my 5th birthday, and he has made arrangements with my mom to take me for the day. So we get in his little VW square back, and you know, he's getting really hip looking, long beard, long hair, you know.
Yeah.
He's full blown hippie now.
Yeah.
And we drive north San Diego, out behind San Diego, out in the country, and we pull into this place, and it turns out to be a nudist camp.
Yeah.
And that's my 5th birthday present. Is my dad's
wants to show you women.
My dad's taking me to nudist camp. I don't really think so. I don't really think his motives were anything like that. I really think he just had discovered a lifestyle where, you know, like I said, he was the Eastern mystic guy, and sun worship and that whole lifestyle was so. I mean, this is the beginning of the hippie era. Yeah. You know.
Yeah. What was that surf family from down? They had that documentary. Was it Doc? And they had that whole...
Oh, Pasquet's family.
So it was almost like that whole kind of, hey, just let's be open and flow with it. And he's going to go down, there's a bunch of naked people, whatever. Yeah. And he's bringing his 5-year-old kid.
Right. And, you know, and what's so funny is I was shocked and very much afraid, but by the end of the weekend, I was a little nudist.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So
most kids are
We're
anyway.
so adaptable, right? You know? But, yeah, so, you know, I didn't see him again until I was almost 10 or maybe a little over 10. But when I was 7, my mom and I moved to Mexico. And, again, I'm the only white kid in this entire city.
Yeah.
And at that time, Puerto Vallarta was there was John Ford, who was a big director back then, was making a movie, or John Huston, making a big movie, with Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, The Night of the Iguana, filmed in Miss Malloy
heard of
right
it,
there.
yeah.
And so there was a lot of expatriates hanging out. It was a very hip place. There's always been a huge gay community in Puerto Vallarta, and but it was very much like Laguna.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And you know, I fell in love with the culture. I just wanted to be as Mexican as I could be. I'm a little white-haired, you know, brown-skinned kid from Laguna Beach, and you know, I fought every day for the first 6 months until finally, you know, here's the thing, man, is if you're getting bullied, and you're getting bullied by a lot of different people, you're not fighting the same guy every day.
Yeah.
But you're fighting every day, and they're not.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take long before your skills
learn how to duck.
Yeah, your skills get polished because I know I'm going to fight as soon as I leave the house in the morning.
Yeah.
And you know,
you're having 2 bowls of cornflakes.
Yeah, I might fight a guy once and then not fight him again for 2 weeks. In the meantime, you know, I'm fighting every day, so you get good. You know, and I started kicking some booty.
Yeah.
So they had decided. I don't know if they got together and made a decision, but one day I was just in. You know.
They're like, we like this kid.
Yeah, we like this kid.
And you weren't a nudist down there, right?
No.
You know? That wasn't why they were fighting you. Okay.
But, you know, it's funny because starved for male attention. You know, no dad. My mom was a clothes designer. I was surrounded by models and women. And I met this young man. His name was Jesus, Chewy, they called him. And he was a horseman. He was a vaquero, and he was a spear fisherman and a bow hunter, and he was in his late 20s, and you know, he introduced himself to my mom before he ever introduced himself to me. And he became friends with my mom and started saying, you know, I can teach your son horseback riding, I can teach your son bow hunting, and I can teach him. And she's like, oh, that's awesome.
Like life skill stuff.
Yeah, because he's got no manner. Would you do that?
Yeah.
You know, and his whole thing was grooming me. You know? And it was, you know, he won my trust, and he won my love, and he won my devotion, and then because
he was the father figure you'd never. Yeah.
And then one day we were on a bow hunting trip up into the jungle on horseback, and he started molesting me. And you know, and for me, it was like at that point, you know, people think sometimes sexual molestation is violent, and I know it can be. I know it can be a kind of a rape situation, but this was more of a nurturing, kind of like developing a relationship of trust. And it was grooming. It was grooming in the finest sense.
And you're 11 or 12 or something?
No, I was 8. And I was 8. And so my first thing is, well, I love this man. You know, I'm not willing to let go of what he's teaching me and the things that we're doing. I couldn't imagine not living with bow hunting and gigging lobsters. And,
So you separated, here's one thing and here's the life that I'm enjoying.
And I'm like, okay, so my compromise was, as long as he doesn't hurt me, I'm okay. I'm not willing to give this stuff up. But the truth is that those things, because perversion being satanic and demonic, its origins in the bowels of hell, cannot help but get more perverted and more, darker. And
there's
darker.
a deeper hunger.
And whether you're taking drugs or whether you're involved in sexuality and it's inappropriate or whatever, you're always going to need more to get you to that same place.
Fitness, pornography,
right?
Food, flavors.
It's always a huge escalation.
And
sometimes but it began to escalate, and he began to do things that were painful. But at the same time, there was the threats, like if you say anything, I'll kill you, or I'll kill your mother,
And what were you going to... I mean, thanks for just being open. I had a friend a few episodes ago, Tony, who shared some of the stuff as well. And they say, 1 in 7 people nowadays has been molested to where it's...
So...
Yeah. Because you have pastored so many people that have faced these things as well, so...
And, I'm a pastor, but I'm also a drug and alcohol counselor.
Yeah.
I'm state licensed, and I work in different treatment centers. And I am a huge proponent of the 12-step programs. I've been deeply involved in those since the late 80s. That's how God saved my life, was through Narcotics Anonymous.
Redeeming all the...
And he's told me clearly, do not leave these programs. And so 95% of First Love Church is people coming out of the rooms of AA and NA and out of treatment centers. I have 40 kids from treatment centers showing up every Sunday. They come on their druggy buggies, In fact, the book I'm writing right now, my third book, is called Druggy Buggy, and it's about my experience working in treatment centers over the last 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. No, there's even for us, there's a treatment center, I think, down the street here. I got a friend who lives across the street that works in them. I mean, this is Orange County, but you're saying, even before we jump into that this whole experience, how did you navigate that? Did you start having this? Because I'll tell you, I'm the passive-aggressive guy that I think if I was walking through the woods in the jungle and experienced that guy wouldn't be alive. And I know the rage that I've had, for years, just growing up in a place, Liverpool, fight or flight. And they're the things to me are the most like our kids don't stay at anyone else's house. And people say they're overprotective.
No,
and I go, man.
Mine don't either, man. I don't let my kids play on the street.
Yeah, and nowadays you can't even. So this, was there a bitterness or a hate? Or was
no,
there
because, for me, I mean, Brian, I didn't become a tough guy.
Yeah.
Until much, much, much later in my life. I didn't.
You fought because you had to, and you navigated life. I had to,
but my heart was always like, I want to know these people, I want to love these people, and I want them to love me. I mean, I wanted to embrace the culture. I wanted to become part of the culture.
Satan's getting in there early.
And so, I just navigated as best I could. And again, I was also, one of the characteristics of alcoholism and addiction is selfishness and self-centeredness. And I wasn't willing to let go of the benefits that I was getting, as long as it wasn't hurting me too bad.
Yeah.
And that's, and what I've discovered about myself is one of the biggest enemies that I have in my life has been compromise. Always.
Yeah.
And so, what happened was...
you think it started there because maybe you wanted even... to hear your dad's voice on that night, so you just said, "Man, I'll do anything to get closer to what I need to have this."
No, absolutely. But then when the pain began and the more intrusive nature of molestation began to manifest itself, I began to get scared. So here's the thing: every Mexican town, the centerpiece, because it's a very Catholic country, the centerpiece of almost every Mexican town is the colonial Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And there was a day, and I was walking through town with my horse, Maya, and it was Ash Wednesday, about 11:30 in the morning probably. I'm lost in my thoughts. I'm afraid now of Chewy. And something that had happened was my mom had met a man named Edward Giddings, a very John Wayne kind of character. He was down there as an architect builder, and he was this guy. The guy was amazing, amazing man, but a stone alcoholic. And so he moved in, and he kept this gallon of Oso Negro vodka on the counter. So one day I was coming back from an episode with Chewy, and I was hurt, and I saw that bottle of vodka, and I poured myself a glass. Mm-hmm. And, my disease of addiction and alcoholism had just been waiting for a door to open. And it's
and there's a just reason right there. You take God out of the picture we don't understand yet. this is going to help your pain, your hurt.
And it did.
This is the practical.
Well, here's the thing: is that in Genesis 1:26 we read, God said, "Let us go down and create man in our own image." So we're created in the image of God, which means we have characteristics and attributes that are directly inherited from His nature in us always.
Yeah.
And before the fall, that was very strong. After the fall, when we compromised, and I say we because we all would have made the same choices that they made.
Yeah.
So Satan has now an opportunity to offer us an alternative, a substitute, a counterfeit.
Did God really say, eat the
and
fruit?
So, I have this other thing for you, and that for me in that moment, that was the vodka, And I drank that vodka that first time, and I was like, it became my solution. And
it became daily, and just
go
in
daily.
your room.
So I'm walking through town, and I'm seeing all these people going up into the church and coming out with their little ash mark on their forehead. And I saw this woman, probably in her 80s, wearing a veil, but I could see through the veil that her face was very damaged, like burned, or half of her face was very much disfigured. And she's on her knees, making her way up the stairs to the front of the cathedral, to the big cathedral doors, and God spoke, and He said, "That's worship." And I'm like, and I just started weeping.
Amen.
And God spoke to me right then and there. I can't say it was an audible voice, but it sure seemed audible to me.
You knew the impression. He was there.
And He said, "I love you, and I'll never leave you." 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to go live with my dad in L.A., and I was rescued from the whole situation with Chewy.
And you never seen the guy again?
I did. I saw him when I was 20 years old. My family's business has been in Mexico for almost 60 years, and I was down there before I got on parole and couldn't go down there.
Yeah.
But I was down there. I think I was almost 20, and I saw Chewy, and I was walking through town with my girlfriend at that time, and I happened to look over to the left, and there was this doorway of this closed business, and it was recessed, and it was dark back there, and I saw this man back there, just homeless and broken, and it was him. And he saw me, and he recognized me, and the look of fear on his face. But he was so broken and so destroyed. He had his little bottle of pulque or whatever, and I saw the ravages of his sin.
The wages of sin. This is the death that's been brought upon
him. And I
him.
just told him, I said, "Chewy, I forgive you."
Even before you were a believer?
Yeah.
Wow, Pete, that's it.
Yeah, wow. But that's always been my heart, man.
Yeah, but look at how God is using it. And some people, especially when we talk about who even these podcasts are aimed for, yes, I love when pastors check in or Christians check in, but there's also people who are going to hear this just because of what you've been through, and they're going to say, well, where was God in this? Guys, this world is crazy, and we're living in the curse.
When He told me, "I love you and I'll never leave you," there was also this sense that someday I would understand. That part I didn't hear, but there was something about that encounter where I was waiting until I finally did understand. I was waiting for that point where I knew that someday I would understand. And it happened like this, I came back to live in LA with my dad, and Laurel Canyon, singer-songwriter generation, jumping off Jackson Browne, Joni Mitchell, David Crosby, the Byrds, the Association, and my dad was a photographer in the music business, so I was dumped right in the middle of all this. Still a full-blown nudist, selling weed, smuggling hash. And and I'm sitting like on the floor in a living room listening to Joni Mitchell and David Crosby jam, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was smoking weed, it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, that
You're
culture.
just hanging out. This is what's happening.
What an amazing
now.
time. And now I'm like 9 years old, and what an amazing time. This is like 1969, 1968.
This is the lowrider, the Sunset Strip, just living the life up there, Beverly Hills.
And so I'm plunged right in the middle of that. And so, but it's funny because I go to this Wonderland Avenue school, and every single kid there is a product of parents that are in the business, and a bunch of pretentious little creeps, And my first day, I see this girl coming across the playground, and she's willowy, she's different. And as she gets closer, I see she's got this scar on her face. And the scar goes from below her eye, down her cheek, under her chin, and onto her neck. And it's a livid bad scar.
Yeah, something happened. This was
She
dramatic.
went through. She ended up. What happened was she went through the windshield of her dad's car and in the back window of the car that he slammed into because he was drunk. And she comes walking up to me wearing that scar like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And she introduced herself, and I was done.
Yeah.
I just was like, I found my soulmate. 10 years old, I fell in love for the very first time. And the first thing she said to me is, "How do you like my face?"
Let's get it out the way right now.
I'm like, really, it's the most beautiful face I've ever seen, and we became inseparable. So, that's if you read my book, Dead Man Waking, there's a lot of it devoted to the relationship I had with Michelle, and she was the keeper of my secrets, and I was the keeper of her secrets. And even though we were very, very young, there was a genuineness and a truth.
Processing what you've been
because
through.
We were the wounded kids, we were the broken ones in this sea of like successful, and I'm not saying that those kids didn't have their suffering, didn't have their dysfunction, didn't have their, but we felt like we were, and eventually our little tribe grew. Like there was this kid named Peter Rand. If you're alive and you're out there somewhere listening, Peter, I love you. He was a Jewish boy, and he used to wet his pants at school. Because he was bullied. And the more he was bullied, the more he wet his pants. And he was being bullied on the playground one day by this big kid named Sidney Brignell, was the bully on the playground. And I'm like, not having it. And as he was pushing Peter out of line in the kickball court, the handball court, I grabbed this steel lunchbox and beat the crap out of his head with it.
Wow.
And I got kicked out of school. He ended up being hospitalized. Michelle went to bat for me, and it became this thing between all the parents, and I was reinstated in school, and Peter Rand never wet his pants again. Never wet his pants again.
Because maybe someone's standing up for him,
and he became part of our little crew, and there was this other kid named Howie Pearsall, and he was a super fat kid, and and he was the object of bullying, and Michelle and I were like holding court with all these broken kids.
Yeah, like a crew, and that's when they probably changed your lunchbox is from metal to plastic, right?
Because of that.
Like there's this white kid who speaks Spanish who's
Pete
trying to attack people. But so here's what's important about what you're saying, and I'm just trying to be pastoral, and this is we're living, and we're going to get back into the story, but in a generation of people that are mad at God, mad at themselves, mad at their family, and they're busy just sitting, doing drugs, playing video games. They don't have the Michelles. They don't have the communities. I mean, I just watched a video of a friend of mine from years ago whose sister just took her life. I've had a couple of pastors recently just take their lives. I mean, suicide is on the rise because they are out in the jungles with Chewy, or they do have the dad that doesn't affirm them. Guys, it's crazy. Please, like I sat with a friend and they goes, "Brian, I just want to live a life of adventure." You've got to look at it like God is redeeming us in this crazy world, but we need to fellowship, we need to connect, we need to be able to talk about our feelings. Even if you're not a believer, let someone know of the crap you were going through. If Pete would have told me, and I was the older brother back then, just met him, this has happened to you, there's people out there that love you, that care for you. They might not even know Jesus. But guys, we got to just get through these years and through these seasons, and that's the goodness of God and other people loving you, So God was there, got you out of there. Your mom stayed in Mexico.
Right.
And then, so you now, it's the first time you've unpacked this to this girl, and she's like, what is going on? She unloads her junk.
Yeah.
You got a couple of friends.
I remember, man, we were, it was springtime, and, I don't know if you know what anise weed is. It's a tall plant that grows up after the rainfall. And
I've heard
that
of it,
and the mustard. And they grow, like 4 or 5 feet high. And the anise weed, you break it off and you chew it, and it's like licorice. Mm-hmm. And so we lived up a Lookout Mountain Road, and there was this big field of anise and mustard plants. And we're walking home from school, and it was a sunny spring day, and beautiful clouds above. And we forge our way into this field, and it's like we made this little area about 8 feet around, and then we just laid in there on our backs and smoking pot, you know. And we began to share our stories, and she shared with me how what had happened to her face, and I shared with her what happened with Chewy, and what was forged between us that day was it was a really beautiful thing. But to get past all that and to get
into towards the biker thing or whatever else was next.
So my dad, we were on our way out to a nudist camp for the weekend. my little girl Michelle's father was also in this music business and also was a photographer, and somehow the parents, and this was not uncommon back then for parents to get stoned with their kids and want them involved because we didn't know any of the perils of addiction or anything.
Yeah.
So, it was like, the drug use in the 60s was exploratory in a spiritual way.
Yeah.
The Beatles were bringing Eastern mysticism and philosophy into the country, and people were taking LSD in a quest.
Well, they were tired of war as well. They were tired of
the culture was
racism, and they wanted to just be loving.
It was a very crazy time, and people were looking for some kind of answers. And so it was not unnatural for parents to involve their children in things where today you'd think, oh my gosh, that's child abuse.
What are we
But anyway,
doing?
so Michelle ends up going with us to these nudist camps on weekends. We're 10 years old, and we're in love with each other, and we're naked. You know what I mean?
No.
So it was crazy, but nothing ever happened. It was like
Yeah.
it became the most natural thing. It all seemed so. And that's the thing about sin, and the thing about
It seems so pure and right.
Yeah, and then you read in the Word that you shall not see your father's nakedness. You shall not see, you just shouldn't be seeing anybody
Noah's
naked unless
sons,
you're married to
yeah.
him. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
But we didn't know. It wasn't like there was a decision to go against what God said, because most people their spiritual seeking was just grasping at straws.
Well,
There
it was new then. I know we had Stephen Bankars on a few months ago in the whole New Age, but literally what you said, most people don't get that. The Beatles brought this whole peaceful idea. I mean, even the music exploded because, yes, they were already huge, but they brought in this idea, this move. Then you had hate and all that stuff. I mean, I'm talking about in San Francisco, you had this whole explosion.
Hate in Ashbury
even
District,
with
yeah.
the Chili Peppers, for Anthony,
Yeah.
he talks about the things his dad led him to. I don't doubt it was
similar,
the same
very
for
similar
you.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So
So you're 10. This is going on.
Somehow we're on my dad's little VW Squareback. We're on our way out to the Swallows Club, big nudist club, first one I went to actually, in San Diego County, and somehow it comes up what happened to me in Mexico, and
in the car with other
in the
people.
car with Michelle and my stepmom Lynn and my father and myself, and it just got really quiet, and my dad didn't speak to me for the whole rest of the weekend. So we dropped Michelle off Sunday afternoon at her house, and we get back to our house, and it's like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and he goes, go get ready for bed, and I go in and I get ready for bed, and I'm like, there's this trepidation, this sense of impending doom that's just hanging over me, and
Like it's changed since they got brought up.
yeah,
And
it's totally
he's
changed.
thinking about you in a way that's like, I'm going to either go address this or
Yeah, so he comes in my room, and he doesn't say anything. He starts to beat me, and he spits in my face, and he calls me a faggot, and he turns around and he walks out. And I think that may have been the greater damage than actually the molestation, And it was years and years and years and years later, after he passed, and he died saved. I went through his personal effects after he died, and I found that he'd been to a Harvest Crusade, given his life to the Lord. He had been reading the Word. He had some Bible study books, and so I knew he died saved. But I also found a picture, because my dad got sent away to private school when he was 7, never to return. His father was 60 when he was born.
never seen him.
No, and I mean, he saw him, on holidays, vacations. My
He didn't have a relationship though.
No.
So he's operating in what he knows.
And what happened was my father experienced the same thing.
You found a picture
I found a picture of my dad standing next to a man when the man had his arm over my dad's shoulder, and the man's eyes had been poked out in the picture. And I knew. Right then I knew. And I forgave my dad immediately, because I knew that he wasn't.
Dude, thanks for sharing all this, Pete. Man, you're I know you're encouraging and blessing people. That's a lot, yeah. So you knew this picture that the eyes.
But what happened for me was that was the day I became a tough guy. When my dad did that to me, I felt so betrayed.
You said, I'm not
first he
dealing with this
leaves me when I'm 4, comes back and takes me to news camp when I'm 5. I don't see him for a few years. Now I'm living with him in LA in this hippie, community, and then that, and I just the next day I was a different person, And it wasn't long after that Michelle's dad got a job in New York, and she was ripped out of my life. And that.
But isn't that the tough skin? Isn't that you going, you know what? There's no one for me. And here's the thing. I've had people that have told me these things happened to me when I was younger, and they said, Brian, here was the harder part. Is when I'm 8 or 9 thinking about this, I'm beginning to then think about other people who are my age. And I've had these thoughts. This is what they're saying. they've had these thoughts their whole life. And they go, so I have the most craziest thoughts now. So even for your dad, his going to these nudist beaches, sure, he wanted to be sexual, but then this could have been a process in what had happened to him, overcompensating. Here's you. I mean, why would he call you that when that's not how you're living, but you've had this experience? Right. It's more, and you know, we've talked about Joyce Meyer before. I mean, apparently, I think she told the world she was raped by someone in her own family over 200 times, and she went back to forgive them with her own husband. I mean, that's powerful. Wow. And then and I believe it was her dad, even said, this had happened to me my whole life. So it's like that animal, sadly, the flesh just acting out the curiosity, the perversion, the wickedness that's sitting inside people.
Well, you know, there. Satan came to kill, steal, and destroy, and he, you know, he's very good at his job.
Yeah. John 10:10.
But the beauty of it is that, see, Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know my thoughts toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of good, not of evil, to give you a future and a hope.
Yeah.
And then it says, and then you will pray to me and I will listen to you. So God's desire to have fellowship with us and to have a relationship with him, God's goodwill towards us precedes our even understanding who he is. He says, I know my thoughts toward you, says, Lord, thoughts of good, not of evil, to give you a future and hope. And then after that has happened, we will turn to him. We will look for him. We will pray to him, and he will listen.
And you can apply
us.
That right to the cross. My thoughts are good towards you because there's a coming Savior, a coming Messiah.
Totally.
There's the atonement. And then from the cross, we begin our now life. So did you ever see your dad again after that?
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, but I mean, our relationship was always very estranged, and because I went on to heroin addiction and gang involvement and prison, and you know, one day he just stopped getting high. And he became a professor at Compton College and got straight and just turned in, you know, well, he also got really deeply involved in Kenjutsu, Japanese swordsmanship, and Aikido and all these. He basically.
So he got disciplined, basically.
You know that song, I'm Turning Japanese?
Yeah.
That was my dad.
Oh.
You know, he basically turned Japanese. You know, and I'm pretty sure that was addictive behavior in and of itself. But, you know, but for me, at the end of the day, what ended up happening was, you know, I went through years of incarceration. You know, I would go to prison and I would swear I was going to stay clean, and you know, I'm deep in my heroin addiction, deep in the gang lifestyle, deep in violence, but always, like, I mean, I remember things happening on prison yards that were very violent, and there's a lot of inflicting of pain onto other people that goes on in the California Department of Corrections, and I was okay with that outwardly, but I remember I would be in my cell at night and I would be crying into my pillow.
Like, this is all wrong.
I'd be like, God, you know, because I remembered what he told me when I was just a little kid. I'm like, when?
Yeah.
You know?
And had you not read a Bible yet, or you'd never really?
And I would see guys carrying Bibles around the prison yard, and I would be angry because, to me, you know, they were using the Bible as something to hide behind so they wouldn't have to participate in prison politics.
Because you're out when you
I knew
that.
they were going to leave their Bible on the cell floor when they paroled. Now, I may have been unfair because there were guys, I'm sure, that were sincere.
Yeah.
But their addiction took over when they got out. But so for me, I would never do that. I wouldn't do that. But I read voraciously, man. I read everything that I could read, you know, the classics and Aristotle and all of it, you know, but I would not read the Bible.
Well, how much time did you do in prison in that time?
Well, I did 3 years, 3 different times, and then a year, 4 or 5 times in the county jail, 6 months to a year in juvenile hall. So I didn't do a big, giant piece of time all at once. But all
that
together,
was the lifestyle.
Added up 12, 13 years probably.
Yeah, that's a lot of reading.
Yeah, a lot of reading, a lot of weightlifting. And but I would get out of prison and I would go to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.
Yeah.
And not every time.
Yeah.
But, you know.
You just felt this bend towards...
Well, it's the thing, because I grew up in Laguna, and I was involved in the Brotherhood of Eternal Love in the Canyon, and a lot of those guys had found their way, like Odin Fong was a shot caller in the Canyon and back in the Brotherhood days, and he'd found his way to Calvary Chapel, and you know, I had just heard that there was stuff going on there that was cool.
Yeah.
And so I would go and I would hear Chuck and I would believe every word, man. I'd be like, this is the truth. But I would feel disqualified.
Yeah.
You know, I would feel like if they knew who I was, they'd want me in a different zip code. And so I would run.
Well, you maybe heard your dad's voice saying you're a this, you're a that. And whatever, whether it's a dad, whether it's ourselves, whether it's the world, you said it, John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. We believe that.
Yeah.
And guys, I'm sure you've been getting encouraged. I know I have, and I just thank Pastor Pete for sharing this. And we're going to continue this in episode 2. But this is Brian Sumner with the Foolishness Podcast. Why? Because the message of the cross, it's foolishness to those that are perishing. But as you just heard today, our brother is growing and grown and beloved in the things of God. Why? Because to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. Stay tuned for more truth, for unpacking some of the darkness of life, but how Jesus shined his light in. For more on me, go to briansumner.net. God bless you guys. Talk to you soon. Amen.
This has been brought to you by the One Story Podcast.
Snyder.